Okay, welcome to part two of chapter 24, The Baroque in Italy and Spain. Where we left off, we were looking at Caravaggio. So although I would like to shift the focus a little bit to a specific artist, although Artemisia Gentileschi is a female artist, and she is heavily influenced by Caravaggio. It is a bit of a stretch at this point to say that she would be categorized as a Caravisti or a little Caravaggio. There weren't many women at this point in time. There were a handful of women, of course. Largely, they were not allowed to be, artists, very specifically artists. There were definitely professions that women could do, but artists, they couldn't, because the fact that they would have to go to the guild systems, or they have to go live with a master, and quite frankly, being a nude model, they thought that was inappropriate to be having a woman live with a master. Although it did happen at times, and in this particular case, Artemisia Gentileschi did do this. She was born in Rome. Her father, Orazio Gentileschi, was a painter, and she, in fact, kind of learned the style of painting through her father, not as a teacher necessarily, but just as a child watching their father. Although I will say, though, that Orazio was extremely influenced by Caravaggio, and he was definitely influenced by the tenebralism that he was using, and I think that clearly comes through in Artemisia's work. So she tutored under Agostino Tassi in 1611. Taught her how to paint, and so on and so forth. And she was the first woman to be accepted into the Academy of Art and Drawing in Italy. So, again, she has uphill battles to face, but she is definitely making strides for herself. She went on to create frescoes for Michelangelo's nephew. But I will say that on a sadder side of history, Artemisia was a victim of sexual assault. And in fact, it was at the hands of Agostino Tassi, her tutor. She was a virgin, and he slept with her and promised to marry her. Now, you have to understand the time; it's slightly different. Different times. He took her virginity, had promised to marry her, and he didn't end up marrying her. So Artemisia and her father ended up suing Tassi and won to reestablish kind of her reputation. It wasn't for the sexual assault. It was for sullying her virginity and essentially promising to marry her and then not. And again, that's that's just the way it was, unfortunately. But with those circumstances, she was able to reestablish her reputation, and she has produced some of the most amazing works that are quite powerful when we start taking a look at them and dissecting them and kind of analyzing them critically. So the painting on the right that we're looking at, this is really an allegory. This is a self-portrait as the allegory of painting. Here she is painting herself as painting. So an allegory, of course, is an image or a story or something that, but let's say for this particular instance, it's the image that kind of manifests and shows an idea or an abstract ideal, an abstract concept. And paintings that are typical of this time frame, typically the artist, when you're looking at like portraits, portraits are usually looking at the viewer. They're looking at the audience, and we don't see that here. She's definitely looking away, toiling at. Again, she is painting. She is the manifestation of painting, and their canvas is untouched yet. But it is proof that women can be an artist. She's showing her potential for painting. The pendant that she is wearing, this is that illusion, that trompe l'oeil, that only a master can create, and she is able to achieve the pendant hanging off of her, and again as proof that she can paint. She is going to be, again, a very well. Her father was one of the first followers of Caravaggio, but you are going to see that she is going to take this tenebristic style that Caravaggio has, and she is going to change it and make it that much more impactful. So the thing is, and since there's so few women in the art history canon, oftentimes, or well, more than often, it's pretty much the way it is ubiquitously, that we always see events coming from the male perspective. And what is extremely important about Artemisia Gentileschi's work is that for the first time, we get to see a woman's perspective on some of these events. So let's take a look at Susanna and the Elders. Now, this is a story from the book of Daniel. This has been depicted many times by male artists. So essentially, in the story, Susanna, these two men claim that Susanna committed adultery, and they were trying to ruin her reputation, or they're out telling everybody that she's committing adultery to ruin her reputation, and Daniel ends up seeing through their ruse and realizes that it's just essentially because she wouldn't acquiesce to their advances that they are mad and trying to ruin her reputation. And typically what we have seen when we do see these paintings, we see that the men are in a more of a, less in a power position. We see Susanna often depicted in more of a sensual repose while she's bathing, because that is what she's bathing, and she's always depicted in very scantily clad or naked, or in a very revealing type of postured positioning, and that has been the typical kind of the depiction of this. But if we look at Artemisia's, we can see that Susanna is horrified by what really results to as an assault, and being the victim of this male gaze. And we're going to start talking about some of these ideas when we get into the next few chapters about the idea of the gaze. And we have talked about it a little bit already with the Venus or Verbino, and a few other things. We're going to take a look at some sculptures that also take that idea of the gaze. But this is it is an interesting and a very eye-opening perspective to see a female perspective of these stories. It is not, again, typical, right? Even though that she is in the classical nude style, she is covering her body from the viewer itself, because it's not meant to be where she is a object of affection. She is just bathing. She's just trying to wash herself, and these two men are again sexually assaulting her. And I think that is extremely rare, but extremely important to be showing it, especially at this time frame, right? So I think the tenebristic style, and I think that this idea of the birth of feminism in a way is definitely seen here with Artemisia Gentileschi's Judith slaying Hernophiles. So Caravaggio had done a version of this. So if this looks familiar, that's where it came from. Again, she's kind of following in the footsteps of Caravaggio. So this is depicting a story from the Book of Judith, which I guess I should note that it is in the Catholic Vulgate Bible, but not the Protestant Bible. But essentially, what we see is Judith and her handmaiden. They seduce the king of the Assyrian army, Holofernes. They make a big meal for him. Right? They get him drunk and they promise him fun time. And they bring him into the bedroom in the bedchamber where his guards are called off, or asked to step outside. And when his back is turned to him, or when he's and unsuspecting, they behead him. Of course, some of the things that we have to look at their faces, the concentration of the women, the determination, and that is prevalent only because of this absolute deafening blackness of the tenebristic style that we see. It just, everything pops out, this huge amount of light that is coming in from the left, and this heavy contrasting shadow just makes everything pop. But something is, I would like to note something here that's kind of interesting that they don't necessarily always talk about in like the textbooks, and capturing the liquidity of fluid at the time, because there's no cameras, of course, is extremely difficult. And just the exact graphical nature of the arterial blood spray. So of course they're either decapitating them, they're going to sever the major arteries, and the arterial spray is textbook exact, like medically exact. So one can question, like, how do you know that? How do you know that's exactly what it looks like? So it's just the amount of knowledge, but the amount of mastery that you have to be able to paint these types of things. This is an extremely realistic trompe-l'oeil style. Not in the same way as we are going to see some of the trompe-l'oeil, especially when we get into like ceiling paintings. But this is an extremely powerful painting. Though everything was not necessarily blood and guts in the Baroque, there is a lot of different styles. If you remember me saying at the beginning of part 1 of this video series that the Baroque as an era has many different varieties and variations within this kind of or this umbrella style. And although Caravaggio and some of the artists that we've been looking at, Nibale Carracci, right? Even though we have these styles and these major players, Guido Reni is another predominant art figure in the area, or in the time frame. But he has a much more classical background. He was a student at the Academy of Art of the Balinese Art Academy. So he's extremely classically trained. Here we see Aurora or Dawn leading Apollo's chariot. It's in a fresco style, heavily influenced by Raphael. You can see this and definitely kind of see some of these Raphaelites, or remember Disegno, this idea that there's clean, crisp, clear, precise lines. The individual there are perfectly proportioned. They are at the height of humanity. The way that the garments are flowing in the air, and the clouds in the background with the atmospheric perspective. This is very Raphael. Go back and check it out and you will see. But what is most notable about this is in that quadro ripetato style. This is all faux frame. This is all fresco work that is not actually present. Right? This is all painted to look as if it was in a frame. So some of the technical painting skills, some of the things that they're doing in this time frame are, I told you, it's a movement or an era of extravagance and just over the top embellishment and dramatic. It is impressive. It is overwhelming. It's what it's meant to be. It's Baroque. So, getting into this trompe-l'oeil that we're talking about, ceiling paintings became extremely popular at the time. This is the triumph of the Barberini in the Grand Salon of the Palazzo Barberini, and he was this was commissioned by Urban VIII, which was a Barberini pope, and this was commissioned commissioned to have Pietro de Cortona paint it as kind of a because the iconography was designed by this poet to praise to praise the Barberinis, the family's kind of divineness, this divinity of the family, or the holiness of this the papalist family. Divine providence appears here, kind of pointing its finger to a wreath of laurels that are surrounding bees. Bees are the family crest again of the Barberinis, with the idea of the wreath of laurels. But this is all fresco work. Right? None of this is architectural. This is all trompe-l'oeil. So this is just a barrel vaulted ceiling, or just a flat ceiling, excuse me. These are all painted. This is not any three-dimensional architecture. This is painted to look like it's coming out of the walls and into the corner in the ceilings. These are ceiling paintings, right? So you're looking up at this. This is meant to severely impress you, overwhelm your senses. But check this out. This is this is by Giovanni Battista, and golly, and this is where the Baroque really starts to separate and get to this extravagant over-the-topness. This is a feat of absolute marvel genius. This is a trompe-l'oeil that is a two-dimensional fresco ceiling painting that is intertwined and with physical three-dimensional architecture. So this is a barrel vaulted ceiling. These are actual architectural elements, as is this. These are architectural elements here. These are actual windows. These are actual alcoves here in the windows. But this, the shadow of the clouds, all of this is fresco work. This here, this opening, this like cartouche-ish, I guess, frame. This is the quadra ripetata. These here are actual architectural elements, but these are not. This is all fresco work to make it look as if it's like coming out of the heavens and into the specific into the specific space, or into this three-dimensional space. It is amazing. So, and to enhance this illusion, these here are three-dimensional figures, right? It helps to make that illusion look as if this was really happening. But that's not the one that impresses me the most. This is Frenangia-Pozzo. This is the glorification of Saint Ignatius. So this is again a blending, probably the most extravagant trompe-l'oeil that we're going to look at within this chapter. This is a blending of the two-dimensional and three-dimensional elements yet again. This is the three-dimensional elements here, okay? And they stop here. If you can see these lines, that is a three-dimensional element. Okay, so this is where the ceiling is, or the actual, everything else is a fresco work, and everything else that falls down into it. This has all been repainted in frescoes. I just want you to stop and think about the mathematical configurations, or the mathematical equations, just of trying to figure out how to make that, because this is a barrel vaulted arch. This is a rounded ceiling. You can clearly see that here. And it's what it is. But it is made and painted to have a single vanishing point, right? The horizon line at God. Okay? Looks as if it reaches to the heaven and opens up. The optical illusion is just absolutely mind-blowing. It is the foreshortening, the atmospheric perspective. It is just technically perfect. And it's mind-blowing. And I cannot stress to you enough the technical virtuosity of the artists during this time period. They hit their peak. And this is some of the most amazing artwork that you can experience in person. So do yourself a favor, please go to Rome and view this in person. It will blow your mind. Okay, so it's kind of a disjointed chapter because we are in Italy and now we have to bounce back to Spain, and there's really no way to turn, to have like a turn signal or change lanes. We just have to dive into it. So let's move to Spain. So we're in the 16th century. Spain was a powerhouse. However, now in the 17th century, Spain is on the decline. In large parts because of colonization of the Americas. They were stretched too thin. The 30 Years' War really put a major stress on their economic, ways of life. So that led them to essentially taxing the people, the taxation to fund the war. And this ended up resulting in a series of civil wars in towns like Catalonia and Portugal. And then we see the fall of the Habsburg dynasty in 1660. So that really, at that point in time, removes Spain from being a major player in Europe. But just because they are no longer a major player in the European theater, we have some of the most impressive artwork still coming out of Spain. We looked at mannerism earlier. And if you remember going back, mannerism is this elongated, emaciated forms, elongated limbs, disproportionate forms. It looked weird, and it didn't seem natural. It seemed uncomfortable the way people would move and stand. And part of that was, this idea of elegance and romance over the form and over reality. It was more about the emotional connection over than that precise reality. So that's really that colorido kind of idea. But what we see is it's different. Whereas in Italian art, everybody seems to be, even in the manneristic style, it's still elegant and beautiful, and there's a opulescence about it. Spain is different. They have a different mindset where they're looking at mannerisms and these elongated limbs and emaciated forms, really in the way that they are interpreting their Bible, is that suffering it kind of reflects a state of grace, and suffering makes one special. So suffering is a gift of God. So what we're looking at is an image, a painting by Jose de Ribera. This is the martyrdom of Saint Philip. Saint Philip, Philip, I guess, was during the persecution of Christians. He was speaking out against, or I guess just speaking very loudly, preaching the gospel, and this kind of the town leaders were irritated and frustrated with him and got angered with him because he converted some of the important people in town to the church, to Christianity, and he led a revolt that destroyed a temple that was dedicated to a serpent. And so they crucified him. He is often depicted, or often kind of in legend talked about, being crucified next to Saint Bartholomew. They were both crucified, and of course Saint Philip and Bartholomew, they were crucified upside down. But if you look at it, we definitely see this influence of Caravaggio. We see this tenebristic style with all of the really dark velvet browns, these chocolate browns coming in, right? The high contrast, but at the same time, we definitely see the mannerism of these contorted short legs to an extremely long leg to a torso that doesn't proportionally add up, and then even though he's being stretched up on stretchers, if he were to stand up, his legs would be super short, and his hands would be touching his calf muscles. So it's definitely not proportionate at all. We're at this low angle, so it has more of a dramatic effect to it. This is kind of what we're going to be seeing, or this style from Ribera. And when we look at some of the other, this isn't the only thing that we're going to see, of course, but definitely the tenebristic style that Caravaggio really hammered home is a major influence in Spanish art at this time. And then I think we'll finish out this chapter on Diego Velázquez. Yeah. So he is probably one that, is an extremely famous artist, and he has some work. We'll look at one today that has very close ties, at least analytically and iconography speaking, or I guess this idea of like semiotics and iconography on par with some of the Jan van Eyck's that we may have been looking at, in particular the Arnolfini wedding portrait of 1434, where we start using, or we start seeing, this idea of images that stand in for meaning. It is like allegory, similar, but the way semiotics and the way icons work. Again, we were looking at like the Venus of Urbino, having a dog being at the foot of the bed, or having a dog in an image. A dog is stands in for something, right? So we have a technical term for that. It's called a synecdoche, but that's not going to be on the tests. So we're gonna take a look at one of Velázquez's paintings that is all about iconography. So he was born in Sevilla, Spain. He studied under Pacheco. He ends up marrying his daughter, and relatively young, in his early in his career, while he was still relatively young, he caught the eye of the Spanish king, King Philip IV, and he was shortly thereafter made to be an official court painter. And then shortly after that, he wasn't in the household very long as a court painter before he was ascended to a position of chamberlain. Chamberlain is essentially like a head butler. He was like a personal assistant. He managed the household. He managed all of the staff. He managed the schedules. He did the day-to-day operations. He made the family run, and he was like the personal assistant to King Philip IV. He has a couple key visits to Italy late in 1629, 1628, 1629. Well, okay, so sorry, let me back up. In 1628, a guy by the name of Peter Paul Rubens, which we will talk about ad nauseum in the next chapter. Peter Paul Rubens comes to court with King Philip IV and comes to visit. And Velázquez is introduced to Rubens, and he becomes acquaintances with him, and they are essentially, they form a working relationship. And Velázquez comes to think of Rubens as a mentor. But Rubens is in Italy. So in late 1629, Velázquez travels to Italy for the first time. And this is a key visit because he is introduced to artists like Titian and Caravaggio and all of the Italian Renaissance artists whom we have discussed so far in this course. And he is heavily influenced by these visits and by looking at this artwork and these artists and meeting them. And then again in 1650, he visits yet again and kind of just takes it all in. He becomes an extremely influential artist in his own right. So on the right, of course, Christ on the cross, we can clearly see the Caravaggio coming through on this, and this is just over the top tenebristic style. There's absolutely no background, right? It is just all subject, foreground and subject. But the realism, this idea of suffering, the emaciated, long, gangly forms, the focus on the blood, on the stigmata, right, on his feet and his hands. It is grotesque almost to a point, because there's nothing else to look at. You are forced to only look at the suffering of the Christ, and that's a really powerful statement. On the left, this is an earlier work of his. This is the Water Carrier of Sevilla. Um, so he also wants to depict, because some of the idea of Spanish Baroque, Spanish mannerism, Spanish Baroque is this again, this idea of suffering as a state of grace, and suffering is a gift of God, because if you suffered like Jesus suffered, then you would be able to get into heaven. And the idea of painting things realistically, painting things that showed this kind of nobility and grace within suffering. And this is really depicted by this idea of juxtaposing everyday life and people of the streets with maybe aristocracy or more affluent people. So here we see a picture of a water carrier with these really crude earthenware pots, misshapen. They're beautiful, by the way, as a ceramicist. Side note, amazing pots. I would love to get my hands on them. Anyways, I digress. Very crude earthenware pots. You can see his clothing is all tattered and torn, very crude, rough garment, rustic wear. And he's juxtaposed by this very affluent boy with a crystal wine goblet, or water goblet at this point, I guess, water goblet. But either way, this very fine piece of glassware. So you can definitely see the two styles. You can see the two class systems. But we can see, again, this is an earlier work, but we can see this where it looks as if he was trying to play with this tenebristic style, right? These dark backgrounds, but then he's taking mineral spirits probably and taking off, because they didn't have turpentine, but to take off that oil paint and kind of take it off of the canvas. But you could totally see that being all chocolatey background. I think that it is remarkable. As court painter, he had to paint in a variety of styles, and he had to paint a variety of subjects. Here we are looking at the surrender of Breda. This is, so if we remember talking about and looking at some of the maps, that's the Spanish aristocracy ruled over parts of the Netherlands, and this is a surrender, the Battle of Breda. This is the painting that depicts the victory over the Netherlands and over the Flemish army. This is the end of the battle. This is where General Ambrosia de Spagnola is receiving the keys of the city of Breda from the mayor of Breda. What's his name? Justinus of Nassau. This is a fictionalized encounter, though. This actually never happened. This never actually took place. But I mean, the battle took place, and they did win this particular battle. And then subsequently, the Netherlands won their freedom from Spain, partly because, again, the fall of the Habsburg Empire. Right, they really lost all of their footing in Europe. But but this is more of a propaganda style painting. So we can see on the left is the army from the Netherlands, and they're kind of all standing haphazardly, disorderly. Their weapons are not. They're just kind of in a haphazard manner. They're all just kind of standing around, seem kind of in a befuddled, kind of confused state. But if you look at the Spanish, they are all standing very orderly. You can see all of their pikes, for the most part, of course, are all extremely vertical, right? It is regiment, it is discipline, it is strength, it is order, right? Whereas in depicting people from the Netherlands as kind of disheveled and unorderly and in need of Spanish rule. But that's not the only thing that we're seeing. We are seeing this lake in the background. amongst the smoke and the ruins of, this is post-war, but we see a cross here, very faintly hidden. So kind of signifying this idea that this was not only a military victory, but this was a spiritual victory. This is a divine victory. This is something that was ordained by God. Okay, so let's take a look at Las Meninas. This is the Maids of Honor. This is probably one of Velázquez's most famous paintings. This is probably one of the most talked about and analyzed paintings as well in art history. It is wrought with mystery and allegory and all sorts of fun iconography, and too much for the context of this class or this lecture. They teach entire courses about this particular painting. So King Philip IV, his wife and his son die, and tragically, and eventually he remarries, and they have a child, Margaret Teresa. And assuming that, this is La Princesa Margaret Teresa. That's what this is a portrait of, and her maids of honor. And to kind of, let's just look at what this painting is and who's in this image first, and then we can kind of talk about it. So, of course, to the left we have Diego Velázquez. Behind this ginormous painting that's sitting on the floor. Of course, we have the Infanta Marguerite Teresa. We have flanked on either side of her Maria Augustina and Isabel de Vasco. Those are her La Minas. Those are her maids of honor. And then on our far right, we see two court entertainers. They're little people, Mari Barbola and Nicholas. I forgot how it's Pertustasto. We see behind the maids of honor a lady in waiting, which essentially is like a nurse to the princess, and a guard. Then in the hallway we see the chamberlain to the queen, Jose Nieto, and then oddly we see a mirror, and we see King Philip IV and Mariana of Austria, his bride. So we assume, just kind of like at face value, it's a picture or it's a portrait of Margaret Teresa. But it's not actually a portrait of Margaret Teresa because she's facing the wrong way to the canvas. So obviously Velázquez is not painting her, or not painting her yet, right? So then I guess the idea would be that Velázquez is painting Philip IV and Mariana of Austria, because we can clearly see their reflection in the mirror, and that is obviously what is being reflected from the canvas. So, and that would kind of then make sense, because this was painted for his private offices, where he would look. So essentially, the viewer is the king and the queen, or the viewer is the king, and this is the way that the king would see, and people would greet him. But once you start thinking about that, that kind of falls through as well, because so if the queen's chamberlain is there, that would make sense that the queen is in the room because he's nearby. But look at the reflection. Look at the size of the reflection. Look at the distance that we see within the room. If they were that close in the mirror, that means that they would have to be standing like right in front of the mirror. So, then that's not who he's painting. And if if the argument was that they were standing off over here, then that mirror reflection would be the entire room, and we'd be able to see the back of Velázquez, right? So I mean, we're seeing some of these mirror illusions like we saw in Jan van Eyck, again in the Arnolfini wedding portrait, but we saw Van Eyck in the painting. So I don't think it's a painting of the king and queen. All right, so think about this then. What is going on? Who are we looking at? I mean, it's essentially a self-portrait of Velázquez. And so he would be looking at himself in a mirror, painting what he sees. Okay, well, it's still not the king and queen, and I think that this is the idea of maybe the omnipresent or the all-present eye of God with the round mirrors. I think this might be an homage or to that, where the ever-present presence of the king. So essentially then what we're seeing is a reflection or painting of the reflection of what Velázquez sees in the mirror, as people are not addressing the king, but people are facing the mirror, pretending to address the king as if he were there. So Velázquez could paint the image of the reflection of what he sees and how he sees it. Super complex. And when you start, I'm going to move it back to this slide. When you start looking at some of the paintings in the room, remember we talked about how he met Peter Paul Rubens. Well, one of the paintings is by Rubens, and the other is a picture of Minerva, the goddess of wisdom and the patron of the arts. But the interesting thing is, if this is then in fact a painting of a reflection, a first-person painting of the reflection of the room itself, of the mirror itself, the paintings are in the correct, that we see in the reflection, the paintings are in the correct orientation. Meaning that if that is in fact the case, then those paintings would have had to have been painted backwards in order for them to be painted correctly in the painting itself. And we will look at those two paintings in particular in subsequent chapters, and the amazing detail that Velázquez has in reproducing the Rubens is quite remarkable as well. So this is what I'm going to say then, is that this is really an image about images. Maybe this is how an artist perceives and manifests what he sees and how he sees it. Maybe it's about the intellectual process of looking. Again, Minerva is in the painting. Okay, and she is the goddess of wisdom and the patron of the arts, patron saint of the arts. So, if it's goddess of wisdom, and then here, this is an interesting thing. What else do we see in the mirror? Do you remember when we talked about the curtain and the curtain being revealed? We've seen that in subsequent paintings, but we have seen it in previous chapters as well. The revealing of the truth is by removing the curtain, or moving the curtain so you can see behind it, right? It's revealing the truth. So Velázquez is revealing the truth to us. That's what he's saying. But maybe he's not revealing the whole truth, because it's just a reflection of the truth. And it's only an obscured truth. So he's actually not painting the truth. And maybe we're getting away from this idea of painting the truth. And we're only painting an image about images. And why I say that, there's an interesting fact. We see Velázquez here with a red cross, a very distinct style of red cross on his chest. And this is a symbol of the Order of Santiago. And when this painting was commissioned and painted in 1656, he was not a member of the Order of Santiago. He wouldn't receive that honor for another 3 years. So there is some debate that he could have went back in and painted it, after the fact. But it seems unlikely. It seems that it's more about maybe wishful thinking. Again, this idea of how an artist processes, how he sees, how he manifests images, how he can construct reality. It is a really, really, really complex series of illusions. Right? Everyone is painted to look as if they are in a mirror addressing the king and queen, looking at their reflections. This is quite impressive, and again, far, far, far outside of the scope of just this chapter's lecture. I implore you, if this is something that excites you, please do some external research on this painting. It is quite mind-blowing what Velázquez has created here.